to co-create value, not just for Japan, but with for the other countries as well, and especially the global South, because what do they need is basically there's a lot of people, but what they need is actually jobs, right?
So Ken Shibusawa founded in 2001 Shibusawa & Company, Inc., a strategic advisory firm for sustainability and human capital development. He also co-founded in 2008 Commons Asset Management, a mutual fund dedicated to deliver long-term investment opportunities to the Japanese household. In 2023, he co-founded Ant Capital, an impact fund management company for Africa. He is also co-chair of the Middle East Africa Committee at Keizai Doyukai, Japan Association of Corporate Executives, co-chair of III Impact Investment Initiative for Global Health, chair of GSG Impact Japan, member of the New Form of Capitalism, as well as other government committees. Very impressive.
That was a mouthful. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Ken-san.
Yes, hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's an honor to have you here.
Great, thank you. It's an honor. Wonderful studio you have.
Thank you.
Right on the corner of Harajuku. Yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah, I know it's quite hot today, but thank you for making the time as well. Yeah, it's really honor to have you here because I've known you for many years as a fan. I've read about a dozen books that you've written.
Really? I think I've written a dozen, so you read all of them.
Exactly. And the more I know about you, I have more questions, the more intrigued and fascinated.
Okay.
And so I wanted to go through your life journey first.
Okay.
And then get it more into your career and your philosophy as well. So first, like what are your most vivid memories from your childhood in Japan through second grade?
I remember running down the gravel road and falling over and hurting myself. I remember that vividly. Also, I remember back then the Japanese cars were very small and not very well built, I think, because I think I was only 3 or 4 years old, but I was standing next to the car and playing with the windshield wipers, and it broke off. And I didn't know what to do with it, so I hid it under a rock. I remember that very vividly.
And what happened next? Were you scolded? Or?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think it was that day or a couple of days later, they found it beneath the rock and said, what is it doing here? And I just did the classic, I don't know.
Wow.
Of course, in Japanese, I didn't speak English back then.
Yeah. And I think you have 2 sisters, right?
I have younger 2 sisters, yes, yeah.
And what are the relationships with them? Like how do you describe?
Close and tense. No, we're relatively close, I think, for siblings, and they live in the United States right now in Providence, and I'm of course living here in Japan, so I don't see them often at all. But I usually get the "what's up" sort of critique of how I'm not performing well as an older brother. So I guess that's a good sign.
Amazing. And did you grow up together in Japan, or like?
Oh yeah. So all the way through when I was in second grade. So the first 7 years of my life in Japan with my sisters. They're relatively close, 3 and 4 years apart. So
I see. And how did these formative years in Japan influence who you are today?
I don't know, because I left Japan when I was in the second grade. I remember being a very shy child. Though. I didn't like speaking up in front of people, and I couldn't express myself very well. I remember that, and I had that trauma all the way through my 20s, I think. So,
wow, that's impressive because what you're doing today is mostly speaking in front of a lot of people.
It is quite amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess it just comes with practice, I guess, or just getting used to doing things that you thought you couldn't do when you were not doing it.
Wow, impressive. And then you went to America when you were in second grade.
Second grade, yeah. So I remember that first impression I remember very well because my parents took me to the local elementary school and they're talking to the teacher. I was sitting looking at them in the other room, and they're prepared to go to leave. So I thought, oh, finally, I get to go too. And the teacher goes, no, no, no. And I thought, my God, you're gonna leave me here by myself, and I couldn't speak the language at all, right? And so that was another trauma in my young childhood. And I didn't speak English, and so I spent the next 2 years in this sort of state of imagination of what people are trying to say, and I would make obviously mistakes, and things like this. But after 2 years, it got okay.
Mm. What were you feeling during these 2 years that you were?
What was I feeling?
Yeah.
Well, frustrated, I guess, because I couldn't speak the language and kind of lonely. But no, I wasn't really lonely because I had friends that in the old same apartment complex, and you know, maybe it's a Japanese thing, but Japanese kids love catching insects. And I knew where the insects were. It was like under the rocks, the what do you call it? The stepping stones, So I would like be turning over the stepping stones, and the other kids would be doing the same. And the maintenance landlord got really angry because all the kids were like turning over the step stones, and so.
So like you were able to connect, like non-verbally.
Yeah,
like
I think kids.
together.
I remember this blonde girl being really mean to me, but in general, I made friends just through, body language, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and
I remember that blonde girl. I don't remember her name, but I remember that was another trauma because like we would sit across each other in the school, and she would prop up her book like it's like vertically, push the book over to my side of the desk, and scribble something on my desk. I'm going like, that's not cool. And so, of course, I would do the same, right?
Yeah.
And the girl goes, teacher, look what Ken's doing to my and I got scolded.
Oh, wow.
So I have a mistrust of blonde women from me. No, I'm kidding.
My partner is blonde.
Oh, I'm sure she's very nice to you.
Anyways, why was she doing that? Do you know?
Oh, maybe she liked me.
Yeah,
no, I'm
that's
kidding.
what
I'm
people
kidding.
say, right?
I think she was just being mean. I think
that's interesting.
That was not interesting. That was traumatic.
Yeah. And how did you overcome that trauma or difficult time?
Just time. Time heals, I guess. No. But as I said, it took a couple of years, but you were able to start to communicate with verbally, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah. And were there any pivotal moments that crystallized your sense of identity as someone bridging two cultures, Japan and
well, I mean, it doesn't come when I was very young because I was growing up in the United States, right? And initially it's New York, but then from fourth grade in elementary school all the way through high school and college, I was in Texas, and I was the only Asian in my community
in Texas.
Yeah, and so I was like kind of like an honorary white, yeah, and of course there was a little bit of discrimination here and there, but basically I was just an honorary white guy, right? And then my parents moved to California, and I'd go to California and there's a lot of Asians, and I thought, oh my God, I'm a minority. So to be a minority, you have to have a group of the same, ethnical group or whatever it is. That was a pivotal point in discovery for me. Another is I grew up in the United States, and I did have an identity crisis because I was a Japanese, grew up in America, and so I knew I was different from all the other my friends. I'd come back to Japan every once in a while for summer or something, and they would say, "Ken-chan, you're so American, and which do you like better?" And so I didn't know who I was until I was in my 20s. I had graduated from college. I came back to Japan. I was thinking but then, hey, do I want to be somebody that a Japanese that only knew about Japan? The answer is no. And did I want to be an American who just knew about America? And the answer is no. And I thought, oh, well, I'm okay with who I am, and that was a pivotal moment. But that took me, quarter of a century. So, yeah.
Fascinating. And I guess your sisters stayed
Mm.
in the US, right? And now you've built your career in Japan.
Yeah.
What do you think was the biggest difference that kind of influenced these like divergent choices between like you and your two sisters?
My sister's very vocal about that. Ken, because you're a boy. That's the reason. It's probably why. Well, that's the reason why my sisters decided not to stay in Japan. They came back to Japan for a while with my parents while I was in the United States. And they went to the international school. But for college, they went back. Well, I'm sorry, they were still in high school, but they had no interest in living in Japan because they were girls. But Ken, you're a boy, so you can get to live in Japan.
And
now, this was 1980, 83, so
83.
early 1980s.
How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about it? Well, I mean, what can I do about it? It's like, yeah, I'm a boy and you're a girl. And we all make our choices. And so, and my older sister is a professor at Brown University, which is very prestigious. And my younger sister is a graphic designer at the New England Journal of Medicine, which is another prestigious company. And they're both happily married, children, very proud, and then they live in the same sort of city with my parents now that live there. So they're good. And my parents are like 90. My father's turning 96 next month, and my mother's turning 87 this year. So, but they're still together by themselves, living there in a small house.
And how do you describe your parents' educational philosophy?
Oh, they were hands-free. So they did not, I don't remember ever hearing them, Ken, you have to study this, study that. For instance, I think they made an effort for me to upkeep my Japanese initially, because they were like Japanese schools on Saturday mornings, to learn kanji, and things like this. But I didn't want to go because, like, back then we didn't have the internet, we didn't have smartphones, we only had TV. And Saturday mornings was a time for cartoons. And I wanted to see my cartoon, and I wasn't going to go to some school to learn Japanese because, that wasn't fun. And my parents didn't make a big deal out of it, and so, but I did keep up my Japanese through the manga. My uncle would send me, what we call Shonen Sunday, Shonen Magazine, Shonen Jump, and that's how I kept my reading ability in Japanese.
Awesome. So cartoon and manga.
Yes, that's the formation of my younger personality.
And I think at some point you wanted to have an online museum for Japanese manga.
Okay,
right.
Okay, you did some research. That's fast forwarding a lot.
Yeah, but can you tell me?
Yeah. Actually, because the internet was coming around, turn of the century, and there were a lot of things going on. And I was, like any other young person growing up, I like manga. And also, like, I lived in New York for a while, and I had this annual membership to the MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, right? And I would go there on Saturday mornings and not read manga, but read the New York Times. And so MoMA was always something that was in my thing. And I was kind of playing around with it with my imagination. But one of the contents that the people outside of Japan was looking for Japan was the manga anime, right? And I thought, well, maybe if there was a virtual museum of manga online, that might be cool. And I had the perfect name for it, Manga, which is a little what do you call it in English? It's a flying squirrel, basically. Yeah. And so I just had this sort of concept,
And it's also like a MoMA and MoManga.
Right,
It's-
right, yeah. So yeah, but you made the concept.
And what happened to it?
Oh well, actually, I was I was I was kind of playing around with it, and I sought the advice of a friend of mine who was he was a fund manager, and he was kind of a well-rounded an interesting person. So I thought, I have this idea, blah, 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 blah. I said, that's interesting. And I have this idea of launching a long-term mutual fund. I thought, okay, that sounds interesting. I'll do that with you. And so Momonga went out the door. and we started on this project for a long-term mutual fund in Japan, which turned out to be Commons Asset Management, which was established in 2007 as a paper company and 2008 as an entity.
And so your great-great-grandfather established 500 companies, right? And 600 social enterprises.
Yeah.
And you have now Shibusawa Company,
Uh-huh.
Commons Asset Management,
Uh-huh.
and Am Capital.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to add more manga to it, or what's
more companies?
more companies?
There are a couple other companies that sort of didn't fly and it just sort of folded very quickly. but but actually the Shibusawa and Company, which is a company I started in 2001, I never thought I knew about my grandfather, obviously, but I never thought I was an entrepreneur. But I had worked 5 years at a large macro hedge fund, and I had this sort of thought when I was turning 40 back in 2001. I thought, gosh, I haven't really done with anything in my life. I've worked at J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and this large hedge fund. But I thought, I haven't really done anything. And I was turning 40, and I thought, oh my God, my life is half over. What am I going to do? And I sort of have going through this sort of soul search, and I thought, maybe I could start my own company. Try it for a couple of years, and if it didn't work out, I'd say sorry, go back and work for some firm. And so I took this sort of leap because I had just gotten married, and my oldest son was just turning 1, and so it was the sort of the financial burden wasn't all that great at that time. So I thought, well, I'll try for 2 years. And then I named my company Shibusawa and Company because there was McKinsey and Company, so why not Shibusawa and Company, right? and ran with it. And looking back on the quarter of a century, it actually turned out to be, well, for one reason or another, Shibusawa and lots of companies in different sort of associations and whatnot. And so,
well, and
so as you can tell, I never plan anything. It's just always on sort of this whim, and looking back, some of it works out.
Yep. And let's rewind a little bit. So when you graduated from university in the U.S., you came to Japan and worked for a nonprofit organization, Japan Center for International Exchange.
It's called JCI. It was launched in 1970 by my uncle on my mother's side of the family, and it was a pioneer for nonprofit, non-government social organization in Japan. I think basically it was in international relations, and I had come back to Japan. There's a term called furita in Japan, right? You graduate, you don't get a real job, you just sort of float around. And so I just floated back to Japan with a chemical engineering degree from the University of Texas, and just floating around. And my uncle said, "Hey, why don't you come? Work, as an intern for this organization." I said, "Oh, okay, why not?" So that's my real sort of job was a nonprofit in Japan, NGO in international relations, which was kind of a good starting point because back then in the early 1980s was a time when all these people from different countries, Japan, Europe, Asia, ASEAN, wanted to learn from the Japanese miracle. So there's a lot of attention on Japan, and I was just a young kid without any knowledge, but I got the sort of, sit on the side and the real sort of powerful people meetings, right, and stuff, and so that sort of triggered this sort of sense that, maybe I could be a bridge between Japan and the outside world, and so that was another aha moment, kind of. Then I went back to business school.
And your uncle, Tadashi Yamamoto, you
Yes.
worked with him, and what were the most transformative advice or lessons that you
Got from
got
Tadashi?
from Tadashi?
Good question. I was never asked that question. Not just, I guess not. I don't remember any verbal advice. But he was a very passionate person that was able to mobilize many different stakeholders. Not just in Japan but overseas as well. And so he was an entrepreneur, basically. He's a nonprofit, but he started this organization, just by himself and a couple of partners. And so I guess I learned that sort of entrepreneurship and this passion for doing what you believe in, that you could actually, make an organization, company. It's a nonprofit, but still a company based on that. And for very high level kind of things, which is international relations between Japan and the outside world. And so that was, yeah, I guess that was very important for me, because having that, then I went back to, business school and to finance, which is very sort of detailed, what's in front of you, what you're, trying to make money in front of you. But I always had this sort of overlay of the sort of the world, basically, based on that, based on my early experience.
So you went from the nonprofit world to extreme profit, especially like hedge fund.
Yeah.
What was the biggest culture shock of coming from like nonprofit to the extreme profit world?
My salary. So I went back to business school, right, from an NGO. I didn't know anything about finance, but back then, if you're a Japanese national in an MBA school, business school, Wall Street said, "Come on down, we need you." So I said, "Okay." I mean, they probably pay a little bit better than an NGO. And they did. And so that was my choice. But again, at the same time, it was based on the fact that the finance industry in the investors here in Japan back in the mid 1980s was a pretty big influence in the entire global capital markets, and so being part of that, I thought, was very exciting as well. So it wasn't just about the money.
And so I guess, like, throughout your life, your journey, like, you've been connecting two different worlds.
Yeah.
Like and instead of or, right?
Yeah.
And for the nonprofit world, are there things that they can learn from the hedge fund and the extreme profit world, and vice versa? Finance sector can learn from nonprofit?
I mean, I'm not sure learn is the right word, but I think it's over the last 40 some odd years of my career, I'm seeing a convergence, I guess, is a natural sort of convergence in a sense. Because starting with the nonprofit sector back in the 1980s, even though it was entrepreneurship, it was all about more like, you give us the money, we'll do the work, and just keep your mouth shut, kind of, because we know what we're doing, kind of stuff. Maybe true, but it was that kind of mentality. We're doing such great work for the society, for the world. Why aren't we getting funded for it? Kind of that kind of mentality. But fast forward with in the current century with internet and whatnot, you see this social entrepreneurship come around, and you got a new breed. I'd say about 20 years ago, a new breed of people in the social sector saying, "Hey, it's we need to be sustainable in our operations, and we need to be more entrepreneurial and more what's the right word for it in English?" So having sort of active dialogue with our stakeholders to show that we're doing this. Hence, this is the impact we're having in our society. Hence, why don't you come and join us? That kind of. And so and I've seen, just in a sense, maybe less to a degree, countries like the United States, but definitely in the Japan context, in the last 20 years, I've seen an explosion of people, social entrepreneurs who realize that they need the money to do their activities, and they need to raise that activity, whether it's through donations or through other social works and things like that. And so I think there's that recognition. Then I think from the business side, again, going back to this whole concept of CSR to a little bit on the ESG, but about impact, is the fact that they create value not just for the shareholder, the financial value, but the non-financial value for the stakeholders, including society, and such. And so I've seen sort of this convergence, I think, over the last 20, 25 years, accelerated, I believe, by technology.
So within like your long years of career, what was the biggest challenge that you faced, and how did you overcome?
Biggest challenge was post 2008. This was the what we call Lehman Shock in Japanese, the global financial crisis. I call it the Shibusawa shock because it blew out my business that I started in 2001. Basically, initially I started out with alternative investment advisory for hedge funds and private equity venture capital for institutional investors, and it did take 2 years for it to really get going. But around 2007, things were looking good. I thought, okay, this is all about starting your own business, kind of. And there's I'd grown a fair amount of assets under management with my partners. And it blew out. It blew out in 1 year. Everything was gone. And so and if it came back again next year, it wouldn't have been a problem. But 2008, so 2009, 10, 11, 12, it didn't. The business didn't come back, and so those were very difficult years. Definitely.
What were you feeling when it was happening?
Depressed. I mean, it was depressing, but so I ended up just trying to get any kind of advisory work, anything that would keep me going. And I did manage, or my going back, I was the president of JCIE for a couple of years because my uncle had passed away, and so I was doing that kind of work as well. So, but I was doing a lot of work just to, not just the company, but just to keep when I started my company, I only had one child, but now I had 3 children, and they're all going into back then, junior high school and whatnot, and lots of they eat a lot, education fees and all this kind of stuff. But so I had to dig into my personal saving, or not personal investments, to actually keep just to feed the family for a couple of years.
So, like, there are some crazy statistics that like more than 90% of startups fail, and most of the business they go out of business, right? And maybe among the listeners, they might be going through something similar to what you have to experience. What would you tell them?
Endurance. Finding your North Star, obviously. And you can't. I mean, if you start changing your North Star, I think then that's when you kind of get into trouble. And other is just endurance. And if you have endurance, you'll eventually get some good luck. I think.
And you did.
I guess I'm still here. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that story. What's the one project or contribution that you haven't made, but you want to?
You have some difficult questions. and it's before noon. What is the most
What's the one project or contribution that you haven't
made?
but feel called to pursue?
I was thinking about that the other day. Actually, one thing is, always, or this is something, it sort of involves my wife because she's always talking about it as well, but trying to find some sort of building some ecosystem of the Japanese local community and the global community, and the senior community and the youth community, which is sort of like, it's very, very, sorry for it. It's not very focused on what I want to be doing. But I think this whole concept of, I've lived in cities all my life, but also like going to the countryside. Many people that visit Japan come visit, Tokyo, Osaka, Fukuoka. But I think many of the inbound tourists that have been here a couple of times, they tend to go to the other areas and enjoy the countryside and whatnot. And there's lots of interesting places of nature and things like there in Japan, but that goes around unrecognized. And with that comes the people that actually live in those communities, right? And so I haven't been able to even sort of draw up a concept for this, but one sort of North Star I've always had, excuse me, is the fact that I think Japan and also actually the Japanese people tend to be the most underrated, things in existence, because of the fact that, because like back in the 1980s when Japan was doing very good, we were called economic animals, and so we weren't even people. And then when we lost a couple of three decades or so, it was just Japan passing and stuff. But I think when you find any, if you talk to a Japanese person face to face, having a conversation, having drinks, I mean, there's none of that. I think basically you can have a very nice conversation. But when that individual becomes part of an organization, part of a country, that all that sort of interestingness sort of disappears. Why is that? So that's always been my biggest sort of, in a sense, that North Star that I was talking about. How does the world recognize the I don't want to sound pompous saying importance of Japanese people, but sort of the value that the Japanese people can bring to not just their local community, their families, local communities, but for the entire region and the world, and that's always been my frustration in a sense. Because I think Japanese people what's the right word for it in English? Majime.
Serious and
That's so serious. But they're sort of diligent and sort of,
honest.
Honest is in there as well. But they're basically good, diligent, hardworking people and whatnot. But if you look at the productivity data or whatever, it's always very, very low, and all this kind of stuff. And so, and so there's a need for recognition of the value that I think there is in the Japanese ethos, I think, in a sense, which hasn't. It's. I think it's getting better, but because I think the younger generation a little bit more. Can be a little bit more open with their feelings and not feelings, their sort of motivations and whatnot, and they are the technologically savvy people in terms of being connected on the internet and whatnot, and so better at communication, I think, probably than my generation and older generation. But they grew up in an environment that says, like, your country have lost 3 decades, which is not a good place to start for most people. But in a sense, though, maybe there's a sense of that for some people, younger people, that frustration, saying, "Hey, what we have we lost? What have we lost?" It's like, we're here doing our thing, and so I'm thinking, hopefully that kind of switch gets turned on. I think going forward.
Yeah, and I think you were part of like working group or the committee within Keizai Doyukai to find Japan's niche, or like how Japan can be.
Oh my God, he really did some research. This is back in 2004. It says, 日本の使命を考える委員会.
Exactly.
So 使命 is like finding Japan's mission in the world.
Yes.
Committee, which is
somehow related to what North Star, right?
yeah, and that's interesting. That was 20 years ago. It's like 2004. So that was after we lost a decade, right? And so there was a sense of the self-reflection of what have we lost, what can we contribute, that kind of. And that was a very interesting committee, actually. It's still up on the website.
Mm-hmm. And I think Japan has huge potential in that we have lots of dormant assets in like people's, like individuals have lots of assets either in their wardrobe or in the bank.
You mean the cash? Yeah.
Cash.
Yeah. I mean, it's a problem, I think, because there's people have too much cash because they're worried about the future, basically. Well, we're worried about their retirement, worried about typhoons and earthquakes and all kinds of natural disasters and whatnot. And so people would rather hold on to their cash. But and it was okay actually during the deflationary years because cash would hold their value. But now we're back in the inflationary stage. So hold on to cash. It's not good. And also, even though there's a little bit of 2% inflation, or I'm sorry, even if they're like deflation and yen value is maintaining, the currency rate in the last 4 or 5 years have halved. So we got poorer by 50% globally just by hanging on to cash, which is not and most people don't realize that, which is a shame.
Yeah, and I guess like you were trying to rectify the situation through commons asset management.
Yeah.
And talking about Japan, so I think you have this concept of 30-year cycles of change, like 30 years of destruction and 30 years of prosperous years. And I think 2020 is the beginning of that new supposed to be prosperous,
right?
30
supposed
years.
To be. Well, I mean, I used the word destruction, prosperity from the Meiji Restoration. There's approximately from just roughly around from 1870 to 1900. This was the Meiji Restoration. So basically, disrupted the past 270 years of this model of the Edo period, the feudal era. There's that destruction, and through that destruction, the next 30 years from 1900 to 1930 was when Japan caught up with the West. And so those are the prosperous years. But with that brought hubris. And I think so after was another 30 years of destruction from 1930 to 1960s, because that's when World War II happened. And it was a big, great reset. Lot of tragedy and destruction. But because of that reset from 1960, basically when I was born, to 1990, that's when Japan was as number one kind of prosperous years. But then from 1990, the bubble bursts, and we said we lost a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. But I'm thinking, well, if it's the same sort of cycle, that maybe from 1990 to 2020, it was the years of destruction. And then from 2020 to the next 30 years, we could go into this next phase. Prosperity might be different from the last years of prosperity, but a different years of at least, a better period than the previous periods, right? Because to me, I do have a engineering background and some science background, and I think everything in the world it never happens at a static state. Things are always moving, but in that moving, there's always a sense of wave motion, right? Cycles, and financial markets the same, economy is the same. Even I would think, perhaps personal relationships and that kind of stuff. There are all these kind of waves, right? And so it makes sense that history comes in waves and not just in a straight line. And so I think we're in this new phase because the reason why I thought about it and with some level of confidence is that 2020 was going to be a big year of radical change in Japan. And the reason why I thought that was looking at the population demographics, where back in what we call the Showa period, when Japan had this population pyramid, population bonus, Japan did very, very well. And then what happened during the last 3 decades was it wasn't a population pyramid, but it was the baby boomers and the baby juniors in this sort of double barrel sort of shape. And that basically shifted upwards for 30 years, maintaining the same shape, basically. Then what happens from 2020, from 2050, the next 30 years, that it goes like reverse pyramid, like really, really rapidly. And seeing that dynamic change in demography tells you that, well, it can't be the same anymore. During the sort of the double barrel it kind of dragged the past memories, I think, and all the successes and failures. But once it goes the other way, it's like, well, you're in this new territory, and you either swim or sink, basically. And so, there may be some people that sink because they can't. They can only hang on to the past, their past experiences in the in the population bonus model. But I think when environment changes, that's when the new switch I mentioned earlier comes on. Say, hey, we need to change this, and so I think population itself, there's lots of negative aspects of it that's always been talked about the demographic shift, but that's I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but on the other side of the coin is that because of that shift, there'll be some people here in the society that wakes up. And hopefully it's going to be the younger generation that wakes up, because there are going to be less of the younger generation. So we can't be talking about quantity as much, but more of quality, right? And there's that potential. And the younger generation, there are minorities here in Japan, people in their 30s, 20s, 10s. But if you look at the world, guess what? You guys are the majority. Lots of young people, especially in the global south. And so the reason why I got interested in Africa 15 years ago is because of that. Africa is a very, very young continent. The population is supposed to double in the next 30 years, right? So fastest growing continent on the planet. And Japan doesn't have much of a footprint there. And I thought, well, maybe we need some footprints. So,
see, and in order to turn on that switch and maybe so that underrated Japan can be discovered in this next, in 30 years of prosperous years, like what can young people do? Like what do you want to tell them?
Well, they have to tell us. No, but I think so my podcast that I had right after COVID I called it Made with Japan, because the earlier Showa period success model was made in Japan, which Japan was very, very successful, basically answering to the mass consumption needs of the developed nations with mass production. And so we were so successful, countries like the United States got very, very angry at us and started this bashing, we call it bashing. And so the next 30 years was a period I call, I'm sorry, okay, we'll make it in your country, made by Japan, which is a very rational decision. But those 30 years started with Japan bashing, but by the end of it, it was like Japan passing, right? And so we're in this new 30 years, and it's also recognize that we're in the Reiwa period, in the new year of the emperor, the current emperor, and I believe it should be not just made in Japan, made by Japan, but made with Japan, to co-create value, not just for Japan, but with for the other countries as well, and especially the global South, because what do they need is basically there's a lot of people, but what they need is actually jobs, right? Job creation. If you see lots of young people, especially young men without jobs, nothing ever good happens, whether you're in Japan or New York or wherever. So, and so there are ways I think that Japan can work directly or indirectly, in this made with Japan collaborative, um, 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 sort of not just businesses, but this activities, and my hope is that if the many countries of the world, many people of the world says, hey, we can maintain our daily lives, our sustainable society, because Japan's side by side with us, with this co-creation. And I think, well, in that if that scenario materializes, that even though Japan's population is shrinking, that should be maybe, I would maybe the word prosperity is not the right word for it, but it can be good times again, I think. So that's not,
Qualitatively.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So,
And talking about young people, let's talk about your kids. You have 3 kids.
my kids.
So
Okay.
the beginning of the episode, we talked about your parents' education philosophy for you and your sisters. But what are your and your partner's educational philosophy for your 3 kids?
Well, I mean, I think dangerous territory. Especially because I think the reason why my better half and I get in arguments with is actually, I think it usually is about it was about the kids, right? And what should be we doing with the kids, basically. But obviously my better half, myself, both care for children. So, but we grew up with different family environments, so we have different, sort of, I guess, experiences, and I wouldn't, values might be too strong a word, but experiences, and so it's based on our experiences as us growing up, and but I grew up in the United States. She grew up in UK, Japan, and Australia, and so okay, in a sense, global. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
And so I think both of us aren't sort of in the school of saying, just we have to have kids that go to the best schools here in Japan. We never had, so we're in perfect agreement with that, I think. But for me, as the father male part of the partnership, it's like, well, in the end, kids, especially boys, don't like to be told what to do, so they'll just do what they want to do. So just make sure they don't fall off the edge and just let them do. And so kind of in that respect, sort of an off hands touch, and where my better half believes a parent should be more managing the children, and so that there was sort of a difference of that as well. But I did start this when my kids are very, very small. Start this routine at every New Year's Day, and there's this phrase called kakun in Japanese, which is a family rules, basically. And the reason why I thought about the kakun, because my great grandfather had the kakun in the family, and I realized that it really existed, and I went through it, and that was a lot of, that was the discovery of my great grandfather through the kakun. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. So maybe I can have our version of the kakun, and so kind of came up with a draft. And when my kids were entering elementary school, and so we every New Year's Day we'd kind of go through and say what can we add to the cocoon? What can we delete and that kind of stuff? And we did that for, I don't know, when they're, it kind of got lost track when they became teenagers, obviously, but yeah, we did that. And so they would put in things like, we should go skiing every year. We should make pancakes on Sundays and things like this. It was just, I don't know if I guess they still remember that. I don't know I've never really talked about that with them to see if that was a good thing or something that was sort of like just sort of a burden, something to do. Oh, the father's telling us to do this and kind of stuff.
And I think one of them was about become bigger, 大きくなる. Was it?
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that one?
大きくなる is I think it was basically because when kids are very, very small and so not physically but their experiences and whatnot it's still contained. So don't limit yourself to that mental barrier is sort of the message.
And
because I think when you leap beyond that barrier that's when the new switches come on. It was for me. Grew up here in Japan, went to the U.S. It was a horrible experience initially, but a lot of switches came on. And then I had my environment in the United States. I came back to Japan and out of my comfort zone, basically, right? And then again, a lot of switches came on, and so it's the cycle of getting into this new, getting out of your comfort zone, having new switches come on, which is for personal growth as well. But as we were mentioning earlier in our conversation, the population demographic change is saying like, hey, you guys are out of your comfort zone really, really quickly. So you need to come on with new switches. And so.
Did you prepare an environment for your kids to go out of their comfort zone? I think you and your partner both had to live in different environments, UK, Australia.
Yeah, I mean, we would always encourage it, but growing up in Japan is so comfortable. Everything is on demand, and non-stress, and so no, they didn't really have the sort of passion to go out of their comfort zone because they were too busy with their club activities, sports club activities and things like this and whatnot. But now that they're turning into young adults, I think they see the merits of at least traveling abroad and seeing the world, which is good, I think, right? So,
yeah. And Eiichi Shibusawa had this idea of whole person is someone has a good balance between wisdom, emotions, and will. Is that something you consciously thought about, like when you were raising your kids to?
Yeah, I mean, we call it what is common sense, and common sense is this balance between, like you said, knowledge, emotion, and will. And it's not static; it needs to be growing as well. But yeah, it's to me, it's the global human nature what common sense is, right? When people react with one another or with society. But it was kind of an eye-opening quote from my great-great-grandfather, because I thought common sense was something that you had to know about, that you had to reach that level. Whereas this is more about not sort of the reaching that level, but it's more about the balance between the three important factors. So,
and you also talked about 12-year cycle in childhood.
Yeah,
and now it's the third phase for your first son. How is it progressing so far?
This is something I just sort of it was based on my sort of experience in growing up with my kids growing up, and I thought, well, shoot, man, first, 12 years, basically up until you're in elementary school, that you're basically dependent on your parent, right? And your parent, and you're guided by your parents' values and whatnot and their direction first 12 years. But the next 12 years is like, you don't want to be hanging out with your parents. It's like, you want to be with your friends. You're a teenager, you got more freedom, you have your own will, you have lots of emotion. Maybe not, the knowledge maybe is not as, but thus I figure like in that period, you kind of say, hey, you kind of got, you, as a parent, you kind of have to, in a sense, in a good sense, kind of let it go and say like, okay, you learn from your children, learn from your environment outside the family, basically, right? Through your friends, school, other activities. And then in the next 12 years is when the child actually starts in the job workforce, right? And then they figure like, oh, okay, I have to do this by myself. I have to do this for me. And kind of this realization that you have to stand up on your own 2 feet, kind of, and that's a new phase, I think, right? And then the next, I think, phase is your parents will get old. And you start not having them worry about you, but you have to start worrying about them. So that's right. And after that 12 years, I think it's if it goes on, it's kind of like a nice gift. So,
and with your first child, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's well? Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they're all. I mean, yeah, they're. Yeah, I think so. I'm an optimist, so so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's trying to. I mean, I think he's finding his own strengths and bearings, independent of the parent and whatnot, and becoming independent in terms of independent person. So I think that's good.
And you and your kids, like your whole family, come from a very famous family in Japan. Your great-great-grandfather is on the 10,000 bill.
Yeah.
And do you feel any pressure from the legacy of Eiichi Shibusawa, and how do you forge your own path with that?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't read manga anymore in the subway. No, I'm kidding. Because I don't read manga. It's on the smartphone anyway, right? So, but anyway, no, I really didn't, because like I was sort of outside of that, because I grew up in my formative years outside of Japan, so there's none of that. But my father was like, and there's a saying, being born with a silver spoon, in your mouth, basically. And so he had a little bit of that, because his great grandfather was Eiichi Shibusawa. And my kids have a little bit of an issue there as well, because like they grew up in Japan, and it's in the textbooks, right? And so everybody kind of goes, oh, you're such and such. So I think there's a sense of downplaying your heritage, basically, because of that, because you don't want to be standing out in the crowd because you're that person. So there's a little bit of that, I think, but for me, I really didn't, because I never grew up in that environment. And so when I started my company, as I mentioned, when I was turning 40, I thought, oh wow, there's lots that I can learn from. Not just the fact that he was established 500 companies, 600 social enterprises, but there's a lot of words that he had left in the archives, which I discovered was the fact that this is the greatest asset that he left for us. And because like I had thought until then, man, he started 500 companies, but he didn't leave a single stock, for his great-great-grandson. So, but this archive of his quotes and what he was thinking and what he was doing, it's an asset that doesn't go away, and there's no inheritance tax. I mean, it's there. So it's there for anybody to use, basically. And I just saw it and used it, basically.
So I think you publishing many books about Eiichi Shibusawa's words are very useful, helpful for many entrepreneurs and also like any people. Were there any pieces of advice that you received and that outside of Eiichi Shibusawa's words, like any transformative advice that you've received over your career?
His words. There's too much
So
too
like,
much of it. But the biggest one is called Longo and Soroban, which is the teachings of Confucius. So that's the ethics. And Soroban is the abacus. So that's the original handheld calculator. So that's business, and that it should be not separate, but it should be integrated. And to me, that message was all about sustainability. It's not just about, oh, you have to be good and noble and that kind of stuff, but it's more about how do you sustain an economic activity going forward for a long time. You need to count the beans, obviously, but if you just do that, you might trip over. But you need to think about not just by yourself, but the other people, the society in general, and answering needs of that society of the whole. It can lead to business as well, right? And so that's the very that's the most what's the right word for it? That's like the top line sort of, the word that I think everybody recognizes in Shibusaichi. But there's all these other things like that you mentioned about common sense and things like this, and so.
And outside of the teachings and like the words of Eiichi Shibusawa, what other advice, maybe from your colleagues, your friends, like that you found useful, like pieces of advice that you found useful?
Oh, he wasn't my friend, but the Steve Jobs connecting the dots. I think that is so true. That it's I am not Steve Jobs. I'm not even close to what he has been able to accomplish. But looking back, that's what I was doing. It was like, oh, this sounds like fun, and it sounds interesting, and then it kind of connected. And in a sense, the connections increase with age. It seems like first it was like very far apart. And as you age or something, or maybe it's experience, I think it's a better word for it, but it tends to connect faster, and you can connect with other things more. Seems like.
What?
Because I think you have more dots, basically.
Can you give me like one example of like something that you were able to connect that is probably quite unique and something that difficult to imagine, but you were somehow able to connect dots?
Well, one is this: my discovery with Shibusawa's philosophy and my work in the financial markets was totally in different spheres of my sort of world, and now it's basically together. So it's all came from this connecting dots, and I didn't plan it that way. Commons asset management came, but that wasn't sort of planned. It was because I had the stupid idea of a museum for manga.
It's not stupid. I'm still looking forward to it. So let's end on a happy note. So,
happy note. Okay.
What activities or moments or experiences bring you the deepest happiness?
Oh, when people around you are smiling and having fun, including, of course, my family. I mean, that's I think that's the ultimate sort of last thing that I want to see in the world when I pass away is when people smiling, not being sad.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an honor to have you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I hope to see you again. And
yes, please.
Thank you so much.
Okay, right, wonderful. You got some good questions.
Thank you so much.
All right, good.
Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks.